You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt, coming to you on August 9th of 2022. Going to talk about the Field of Dreams game that's happening this week. MLB makes an announcement about a series overseas, bunch of injury news, and then an unfortunate passing to the game of baseball this past week. But before we get to all of that, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing pretty good. Just chilling this week, watching some baseball and just hanging out. So it's been a good week so far. Ready to get talking some baseball.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun to watch the fallout of the craziness from the past week we had with the trade deadline and just see where kind of teams have stacked up so far. Who's been playing well so far, who's been not playing so well, and just the overall. I mean, I feel for all the craziness now getting into a week later. Like how does it feel with a week later? Like how's your landscape of baseball looking at it? A week after the trade deadline. I know everything was so jam packed when we did it on Tuesday after it. Now we've had some time to reflect. What are your full thoughts on it?
I mean, I think that people are going to panic about certain teams too quick, especially with the trades that they've made, like the Padres. I think a lot of people are panicking about the Padres because I think they went 2 or 3 games without scoring a run after they made all these trades and got Drury, got Juan Soto, and but baseball's still a sample size game, and if you have a few games in a row where you have something like some bad luck, or just everyone's just a little bit off, you're facing good pitching for a couple games, like that kind of stuff can happen. And a lot of people have been talking about how the Padres have struggled and, oh god, they're collapsing again. But and there's been a few of those around since the trade deadline. The Braves had a really bad weekend. They got beat 4 out of 5 by the Mets, who look to really be in control of the NL East now. And there's been a few series like that. I think the Brewers got swept by the Reds, maybe, or lost at least 2 to the Reds. After
the Yankees.
Some of the Yankees. Well, the Yankees, I think, they've kind of been playing that way for about a month now. But Frankie Montas getting lit up wasn't very very good to see for them. But
yeah, no, and I just hitting on them. I don't even think they won a game until yesterday, since the deadline. So I think they went 0-6 or something up until that point. But yeah, I mean, you do make some good point. It is a lot of overreaction on those teams, but it is kind of it is kind of weird. We see this every year at the deadline. Like the teams that maybe make the biggest moves, sometimes after that big move happens, they don't just automatically gel right away. Those new players got to come in there, and a lot of teams are making big moves. It's a team that is either on the edge of competing or competing big time in their division, and sometimes messing up that chemistry for just a little bit can throw them off. But at least in the Padres case and the Yankees, you definitely expect them to turn around. And the Brewers, it's going to be interesting to see what the fallout actually is of the Brewers, because one of the guys they already traded into Nelson Lamet, they've already let go. And then trading Hader away, that was a big part of their clubhouse in general. So it's going to be interesting to see how that is.
Yeah, I can't believe they just DFA'd Lamet. Like, I figured that he would have been somebody that they would at least attempt to fix something with him, turn him into a good bullpen arm. Because I mean, it's not we're only a couple years removed from him being a really good starting pitcher, and I know he's had a lot of injuries, but man, just DFAing him without even giving him a shot, that seemed weird to me. I mean, I figured that was actually a legit part of that trade, and not just like a throw-in for money reasons. But it seems like it is.
He has legit stuff. He really does. And it was really shocking to see that they DFA'd him. It was on Friday, I believe, right? I want to say it was Friday morning that he got DFA'd. Yeah. But in general, it was pretty wild. But it is kind of funny looking, after a week later, looking back at it and just kind of seeing what the full thoughts are. But let's go ahead and move on to the main topic of this show with the Field of Dreams game we talked about last year was a great game between the White Sox and the Yankees. The whole production of that with Fox, they did a really good job. It's been, renewed for at least a second season this year. It's going to be this week on Thursday night at 7:15 Eastern time. The game's going to be between the Cubs and the Reds, so I don't know if it's going to be as competitive as the game we saw last year. But I know that it was really cool last year, and they're bringing it for a second year. Are you worried that it's not going to live up to the hype again this year?
Well, I think one of the big things about it is that last year, not only was this like a really cool event and stuff, but for one thing, it was a game between two really, really good teams that were World Series contenders. And this year, it's pretty much the opposite of that. It's two of the worst teams in the league. I mean, you're talking about, the Reds and the Cubs. They're just bad. But I mean, some of the novelty of it being a Field of Dreams game might have worn off. It was kind of a unique thing last year, but kind of just repeating it this year, it's kind of weird. I think that this type of thing should be repeated a lot, but I think that maybe just you do different things every year, like have a Field of Dreams game one year, and then the next year have some other type of game, have a game at a historic site, like say you play a game in Cooperstown or something, play a game at I know they did the Little League World Series a couple years ago, and they did that game at I forgot which fort it was, but for the military game, like play a game like that, and just I would change it up year to year, because I mean, if you just do the Field of Dreams game 4 years in a row, people aren't gonna care anything about it being the Field of Dreams game anymore. So, but it's a cool. I think it is a cool event, and it's good that MLB is doing something like this to outreach. And one thing, and I'll bring this up again in a little bit with one of our other topics, but I'm glad that it's a game that you're not taking a home game away from the Cubs or the from a team that's in contention. Down a stretch of a season, it's more of just like you're playing a game between two teams that are got out of contention, probably aren't going to have great attendance at their game anyways at home. So you're not like taking money out of their pockets and taking a game away from a great atmosphere that would be taking place. Although Wrigley Field typically is a good atmosphere, even when the Cubs are bad, but it's one of those things too. They are playing a game that I don't think it's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot more eyes on this type of game because it's the Field of Dreams game than it would be if it was played in Chicago or Cincinnati. So I think that's also a good thing about it.
Yeah, my whole thing. I mean, I don't mind the Field of Dreams game, like you said. It's going to be something that brings outside viewers into a game of baseball. And my whole problem is I just don't want it to feel like this year is a letdown. I feel like last year was such a good game. The game was awesome. The broadcast was awesome. Like everything to do with that whole, like, it was kind of like a week-long celebration even getting up to it. But really that whole day of everything they did with, the players and walking out of the corn that way, like it's stuff that you hadn't seen before that was, was cool. It was cool to see for the first time. I just feel like that luster is not going to be there this year. And I don't feel like the game's going to, live up to as much of the hype as it did last year because, it's the Cubs and the Reds. So I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But, it would be something that I would, put in a rotation, like you said, do other things, maybe bring a Field of Dreams game back every 3 or 4 years, maybe, or 5 years, and then do a Little League Classic, and then on an army base or on some sort of military base, or at a historical site like you were mentioning, and just make it like a rotation that way, so it doesn't just all get jumbled up and every year you're trying to compare it to the last year, which I feel that a lot of people are going to do. I feel like at this one they're going to be like, oh well, last year's was great, but this year's was not great, and it's a letdown. And I think that's what I'm really afraid of happening.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case here. But we'll see. Hopefully, it's a great game and it's entertaining and people tune in and everything. But I won't hold my breath over it.
Yeah. So, jumping on the fact of trying to bring eyes from outside the sport in for a game, MLB also announced, I think it was last week, but with the trade deadline, we were so busy, we didn't get to talk about it. MLB announced the London series is going to come back. We know they've done a London series before. They've done a series in Australia, and I believe one was in Japan as well, if I'm not mistaken. But they've announced it for next season. It's going to be June 24th and 25th, a 2-game series between the Cardinals and the Cubs.
Yeah, so I think that one of my biggest things that I think that Major League Baseball needs to do is outreach in Europe, because they've got a great base in Asia with baseball people, in baseball. South America and Central America, especially. Central America obviously is huge, but in South America it's growing in a lot of places. Venezuela, Colombia, but it's starting to also kind of grow in like Brazil a little bit. But really, where baseball's never really gotten a big foothold is in Europe, and I think that going over there and playing a game in London, maybe in a couple years play a game in Germany or in France or something. That's stuff that I think is a really, really, really good thing for the game. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, I was talking about how the Cubs and Reds are not really taking a big game away. But I don't really like the fact that they're going to play a Cubs Cardinals game over there. Like, make it an interleague matchup that's not really a big rivalry or something. I mean, Cubs Cardinals, every single one of those games should be played in St. Louis or Chicago. I mean, that's like one of the sacred rivalries of baseball. It's like the Giants Dodgers, or the Yankees Red Sox. Like, it's one of those types of things where you really want that to be played at a home stadium. But either way, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see the reception for this over there, and hopefully grow the game overseas. I mean, we've seen what's happened with the NFL and how much they're getting support over in the UK now, and in the NFL. Football is not even an international sport at all. I mean, it's not played anywhere but the US. I mean, baseball is already an international sport, and you can grow it to another continent and do really well. So I think that's huge for the game, and I'm really glad that they're doing this again. I just kind of hate that it's the Cubs Cardinals matchup, because that's one that, I feel like that should always be played at a home ballpark, but that's just me. So
Yeah, I do love that they are making this attempt to go and reach out into the Europe, um, the Europe region to try and bring baseball over there as well. To me, I don't. I think this is a game, or at least a 2-game series that should be, taken abroad, places that, like, hey, the Cubs and Cardinals is a big game, like, the rivalry there, and if as long as MLB does it the right way, like, you can play this up. You can play the Cubs Cardinals rivalry up to hype it up even more over there, um, rather than if it's just a game between the Twins and the Reds or something. Like, I don't think anybody would be as interested in that game. I feel like it is good to have some sort of a high profile team, or 2 high profile teams in a rivalry matchup. I think that adds to the allure of what you're doing by taking it over there. And if you're, I think, don't hold me to this, but I believe they're each going to be the home team. So it's really taking like one home game from each. That's really not all that much. And I think the exposure you're going to get from being overseas, as well, is going to help that revenue per se. And MLB is going to help the teams with the revenue at that point. But I think at least to me, that should be the type of series that gets taken over there, so you can really showcase like what baseball is, especially in a rivalry game where the Cubs and Cardinals always play close. The Dodgers and Giants always play close. The Red Sox and Yankees always play close. It's just something about when those teams match up, they're usually good games. So to me, I don't hate the matchup here. I think it's actually a matchup that should be, for it. And I think this is the type of matchup that should be in the Field of Dreams game, rather than a Cubs Reds, where I understand that's still a divisional game, but the Cubs Reds doesn't have the allure to it. I mean, last year was good because of the White Sox and the Yankees, but I mean, if you had a Yankees Red Sox game, or if you had a Dodgers Giants game, or if you had a Cubs Cardinals game, or any one of those actual rivalries there, like, I feel like the game's more meaningful at that point. So I like that, being at the London series with a series like this.
yeah, and I get your point. I just I think that it's those specific games, like the not necessarily the fact that it's two good teams. Like, if the White Sox played the Yankees, if they did that over in London, I think that would be fantastic. That would be like a best case scenario, because that's not two teams with like crazy animosity to each other and stuff. But it's something about those three rivalries, the Red Sox, Yankees, the Cardinals, Cubs, and the Giants, Dodgers, and a few others to a lesser extent, like the Subway Series or the Braves, Mets, or somebody like that. But it's those like three like super big time rivalries that I think the biggest part of them is the fan interaction. The fans being all all the hatred and going into packed out crowds, and I think that just it kind of stinks to have that to take those away. Whereas you could have the Yankees play the White Sox over there and have a great game between two really good teams, and have that as the showcase where but you still get that those sacred rivalry games at home. So, but I don't know. Either way, I mean, I think it's good that they're doing a good game in London. I think it's fantastic for the sport. So
Yeah, and it also helps branch out from the home run derby X that they did
yeah,
in London as well, kind of as a precursor to something like this. But overall, I think both of these things, the Field of Dreams game and the London series that's going to be coming up next year, I think it's great for baseball. It's a part of the game that needs to happen, trying to grow and bring outside eyes into the sport and get more people to know the game. So I think that's a good thing. But let's jump over to a bunch of injury news that has come out over the past week. The first one we're going to start with actually came out earlier this morning, and it's with Chris Sale. He's battled injuries the past couple years, coming back from a Tommy John surgery and then having a fractured rib. Well, he ended up, I guess, was riding his bike down a hill, hit something, fell off, ended up fracturing his wrist, and now he's out for the rest of the season.
yeah. This is just you know it's tough with Chris Sale because he is a guy who, like, it feels like obviously Tommy John's not a freak injury. That's something that happens a lot to pitchers. But these last 2 years has been the freak injuries. I mean, he came back from Tommy John last year, pitched down the stretch, pitched in the playoffs, and he was decent. He wasn't great, but he was decent. And then this year, coming into the season, had that weird rib injury. That was like it was a weird rib injury, and then came back from it. First game back, gets hit in the hand and breaks his finger and goes on the IL. That's a freak injury. And then now he has a bicycle accident that breaks his wrist. So it's like it's really tough with him. I mean, he's only pitched since 2019. In the last 3 years, he's only pitched 47 or 48 innings. So he's starting to enter like Strasburg territories of not pitching. Although obviously his injuries that he's had aren't quite as, bad going forward as Strasburg's thoracic outlet syndrome is, but it's really tough for Sale. I mean, that stinks. And, the Red Sox, who are kind of on the periphery of still being competitive, and, they did this weird buy sell thing at the deadline that, where they sold, they traded Christian Vasquez away, but they traded for Eric Hosmer and they traded for Tommy Pham. And, that was a weird thing to do, but they kind of aren't sure where they're at. Then now Chris Sale is not coming back where they thought he was, so it hurts the team. Obviously, I hope Chris Sale gets healthy and is ready to go next year. They said he will be ready by spring training next year, so hopefully he has a healthy season next year. Believe it or not, he's entering his age 34 season. It's kind of hard to believe, but this is a guy who's a Hall of Fame talent. He just hadn't been able to stay on the field the last few years.
Yeah, Chris Sale is incredibly fun to watch when he's on the mound. It's like you mentioned, it's the past couple of years. It's just been when he's on the mound. Hopefully, the wrist injury. I mean, it might linger right into the beginning of the offseason, but I mean, if he can have at least a full offseason of not having to deal with any injuries at that point and really just focus on building his strength back up, working on himself, the mechanics wise, because he does have that weird kind of motion. It's herky jerky. Things can get out of whack. If he can just work on everything, get everything to where it's not hurting and just in line, there's still a room that Chris Sale can have a good 3 or 4 more seasons, really good 3 or 4 more seasons. So I really hope he can do that because he's one of the funnest pitchers to watch when he's on. The fastball with the wipeout slider that he has, it makes hitters look stupid. It really does. So
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's go ahead and jump over to the White Sox now. And with their starting shortstop, Tim Anderson, he ended up tearing a ligament. I believe it was in his thumb, but I could be wrong. One of his ligaments in his finger. And he is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, but it's looking more likely on the back end of that timeline.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate for the White Sox. They had just started to get it going just a little bit, and then boom, you get another injury to one of your key players, and it sucks for Tim Anderson. He's dealt with injuries this year, and the White Sox in general have dealt with injuries this year. I mean, they've had all kinds of injuries. I mean, you had Lance Lynn missed so many games. You had Giolito missed some games, if I remember correctly. You had Liam Hendricks miss some games. You've had AJ Pollock's missed a lot. Yasmani Grandal's missed a lot. Tim Anderson has already had one IL stint. He's having his second now. Eloy has missed a lot.
Moncada.
Moncada missed a lot of the start of the season. I mean, the injuries have just really zapped the White Sox this year. And honestly, everyone's talked about how bad the White Sox have been and how they've been, just disappointing. And obviously, it's not the only reason for that. It's not injuries, but that's a big part of it. I mean, they've had so many. They've had this good collection of talent this year, and it just hadn't all been on the field. So, and a lot of it's been, it's not like these guys are all like injury prone guys. I mean, Tim Anderson kind of is, but when you look at like Yasmani Grandal, not really an injury prone catcher in the past. He is a catcher after all, but Lance Lynn's been a pretty durable starter for the last few years. I mean, Giolito, I don't think's ever been on the IL. Like, Pollock, definitely injury guy, but Eloy, I mean, it's been really unfortunate for the White Sox for a lot of the season, but we'll see. Obviously 6 weeks would put us late September, and with that division, you just never know. I mean, the White Sox might be able to stay afloat, because of that division. Even though I think the Twins made some really good improvements at the deadline, but man, it's just tough on the White Sox, and obviously, Tim Anderson was having a really good season, so it's tough on him as well personally. But definitely tough, and the Twins are now a pretty good favorite to hold on to that division, even though they're only 2.5 games up on the White Sox. They're 1 game up on the Guardians, but we'll see what ends up happening. That might end up being the most entertaining divisional race there is out there this year. Even though obviously, it's probably not going to be a divisional race that matters that much to the World Series, but
Yeah, losing Tim Anderson, who is one of their heart and soul players, one of the players that in that clubhouse brings the energy every day to them. He's their leadoff hitter. He kind of sets the tone for their entire team. He's a really good defensive shortstop. He mentioned the season he's having. In his 79 games, 301 average, 339 on base. Doesn't slug a lot, but I mean, with a guy like Tim Anderson, you don't expect that. It's going to be really tough because he was the guy that would at the top of that order kind of sets the table for the rest of the offense, and losing a guy that gives you that type of production there, as well as him being one of the clubhouse leaders and one of the heart and soul players of your team. That's really going to hurt for the White Sox, who kind of need that. They with all the adversity they've kind of dealt with this year, you need that guy that it's kind of the glue for you, and then all the controversy behind Tony La Russa the past couple years. Even I know this year hasn't been as loud as it was last year, but there still is some controversy around him. At least losing a guy like that on the field. I mean, I'm sure he'll still be in the clubhouse, but losing a player like that on the field every day is gonna hurt. And I wonder how much of an effect it's gonna have. Throughout. I know obviously in the games because he's missing, but just in general, what it does to that team. It's going to be really kind of fascinating to watch if they're able to stay together and play together.
yeah, and that's 100% true. And you do remember, now, if you say it's a 6 week injury, he could potentially be back for a playoff run. So that is an important thing to look at because, looking at the standings and projections and stuff, the White Sox actually have the third weakest remaining streak to schedule in the American League. So, I think they definitely have a shot to catch the Twins. So we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see how the White Sox do without Tim Anderson. I'm not even sure who's going to play shortstop. I guess Luis Garcia will, but Um,
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he kind of taken over second base for Josh Harrison,
yeah,
but I guess that means Harrison's going to play every
because
day
Josh
again.
Harrison's going to be playing every day again. But I don't know if I like that. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what ends up happening. It's definitely a bummer though to see him out.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Well, let's jump back to the AL East, where we have one of the players that had kind of had a renaissance this year with the New York Yankees, and that is Matt Carpenter. He actually fouled the ball off his foot yesterday, has a foot fracture. He's not quite sure how long it's going to be out. He said he's hoping he can return kind of at the end of September as well, kind of towards the playoffs. But usually these foot fractures, it's all just kind of how fast they're able to heal themselves.
Yeah, so Matt Carpenter's obviously had a really crazy season. 15 home runs and 154 plate appearances is insane. Only 47 games played at age 36 after being basically kicked out of St. Louis. Just he's had an insane year, but that's a bummer for the Yankees, and also you got to remember Anthony Rizzo. He's not on the IL, but he's actually got some back problems. They've announced recently, and he's kind of dealing with, and he's gonna play through them to a certain level, but he might not be 100%. So you lose two of your potential like first base DH type candidates right now to that to injury, and or at least partially to injury. And man, that's it's gonna be tough on the Yankees not having those two guys, because they've really carried this team at times this year outside of Aaron Judge.
Yeah, well, and then just jump back to Carpenter's road this season at least. Don't forget he signed a minor league deal with the Texas
Yeah.
Rangers and couldn't even make the major league team with the Rangers. And I know we've talked a lot this year about the Rangers not having talent wise there, and I understand maybe wanting to give some of the young guys a shot, but I mean he was still pretty solid in there. I think he was in AAA with them, but to a month or two into the season to then opt for free agency because you weren't getting called up to the major leagues with the Rangers, and then sign a deal with the Yankees, and then have the type of season that you're having right now. It's a testament to his hard work and his swing changes that he's had to make. Because he's had to make some of those for lack of being able to the bat speed as you get older, and the launch angle. He was like one of the big launch angle guys. So being able to change all of that and have, kind of a renaissance season, like I kind of said at the beginning, it's been really, I wouldn't say fun, but it's been really interesting to watch what Matt Carpenter has done, um, because it just seems like he was hitting a home run or getting out all the time for a good while there. But it's going to be a big loss for them because you mentioned he was somebody who was able to play that potential first base spot with Anthony Rizzo if he has to miss time. I think he was even playing partially some of the outfield. Ever since Stanton has been out and on the IL, he's been having to play some right field for them at times as well. I know they got Bader, but they're still waiting for him to come back. So he was a guy who was playing pretty much every day as of late, and still being pretty productive. So it's going to hurt the Yankees in that part, but hopefully if they get a guy like Bader back, if Hicks can stay healthy, you can sort of take over that role there, and maybe he comes back with a couple weeks left in the season or right before the postseason and gives you that lefty bat that you need. But jumping back to the Cubs, which we spent a lot of time on to begin the show with the Field of Dreams game in the London series. But the Cubs made an interesting announcement yesterday. It's with Jason Hayward. He signed a massive contract. I believe it was 6 years ago. He had a year and a half left on his deal, and they pretty much announced that he's done with the team. He's not going to be with the team for the rest of the season, and that he will not be with the team moving forward into the 2023 season as well.
Yeah, and I hate it for Jason Hayward. I think he's a great guy, and I got to spend a lot of time, watching him play early in his career. But it sucks for him. He obviously just hasn't cut it on this contract in Chicago. It's been a disaster contract. I mean, he's put up an above average season hitting one time since he's been in Chicago, and that was in the short 2020. It's just been a really rough time for him. Now, I thought it was interesting that they announced that they were gonna take him, or that they were gonna not have him come back next year but that they haven't released him yet. So I'm assuming that they might try to trade his contract in some way. I don't know if they'll try to, bad contract swap with him to get somebody that might play in their lineup a little bit, or if they're going to, just try to package a prospect with him to clear their books of him next year. I don't know what their offseason plans are, but they haven't released him yet. So there might be a way they're trying to move that $23 million he's owed next year. But, it's a bummer for Jason Hayward and, for the Cubs. I mean, this was just a contract that didn't work out. And, it felt like when he signed it, they might have been paying too much for him. And it ended up being like way beyond that. So, bummer for him, but it is what it is for him, and hopefully this isn't the end of Jason Hayward, but it very well might be the last time we see him, in a big league game. So
Yeah, I have somebody has to at least take a flyer on him. I mean, you would think at least, especially if the Cubs are willing to package a prospect and pay down some of his contract just to get something off their books. Um, he hasn't been the greatest as of late. 2020 had a pretty good season, and then last year we've really failed to produce anything. But he just feels like somebody who should still have some sort of a mentor spot on one of these young teams. At least for next season through the end of that contract, and then moving forward, who knows? I know he doesn't do anything great anymore, but you just listening to what Jed Hoyer was talking about, the person, the man that he is, what he does for the community, what he does in the clubhouse. There's got to be some team that would take on, willing to take on some of the contract next year to just get a guy like in their clubhouse, help him mentor some of the outfielders, and go moving forward with that. But it does suck overall for the guy, for the man Jason Hayward, even though the player hasn't lived up to it.
yeah,
But jumping back, one of the injury news that I forgot to mention, which I don't know how I forgot it, but was Clayton Kershaw on, I believe it was Wednesday last week, exited his start in the fifth inning with a back injury, and he went on the IL. The back injury he had earlier this year was on the right side. This one's on the left side, and it seemed to say that it's not as serious as that one that cost him 6 weeks of the season. And they're kind of looking at potentially somewhere in that 3 to 4 week span of having him able to come back.
yeah. I mean, when we talk about Kershaw, I mean, it's just part of Kershaw now. You look at him as a guy who he's had a lot of injuries and to his back over the past several years, and there's gonna be times where it's just not right, and he needs to take a few weeks off. But it's one of those things that seems like it's not something that's gonna keep him out for the rest of the season or anything. It sucks to watch a guy like him, and for that matter, we talk about the chronic back injury that Mike Trout has now. That it's such a bummer that he's keeps getting hurt, and with that same injury. So, um, I mean, it is what it is. I'm glad that it's not something like an arm injury or something, but hopefully it's just a few weeks. But it's part of Clayton Kershaw now. When you just gotta have to accept that he's gonna miss a couple weeks every so often because of that chronic back injury that he's got. And same thing's gonna happen with Mike Trout, which is so unfortunate to have to watch those two like future Hall of Famers struggle with these injuries when honestly they're still really really good players at this stage in their career. They just can't stay on the field.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's like, even with Kershaw's back injury that he's been dealing with, he's almost as good as he's ever been. I mean, I know he's not quite the 1.7 ERA guy, but I mean, he's had a really great season this year. And when he's been out there, and the random part is it's at random times. One time it was on a flight from Pittsburgh, and then the second time it's, he was pitching just fine and did like 5 warm up pitches, was just fine. The 6th warm up pitch, something bit him. And then he tried to throw another one, and then he knew from that time where he had to come out. But it is something that you're going to have to deal with Kershaw, which is why I was a little surprised that they didn't go out and try and find at least another, somewhat of a depth starter there, and they traded Mitch White away. Was one of my things. I think they should have went for another depth starter. But it does sound like Dustin May should be back within a week or so. He's doing a rehab start tonight in Oklahoma City, and they're going to evaluate him after that if he's either going to make his next start in the majors or do one last final rehab start.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to ask it, because I haven't really thought about it much, but do you know, since you're the resident Dodgers fan here, do you know anything about Walker Buehler potentially coming back? Or
So Bueller is throwing. He actually threw today in the outfield. It still does sound like a middle to late
yeah,
September deal, but it's all kind of just how how he feels. Because remember, he also went and had that bone chip removed
yeah,
in the pitching elbow as well, so he's kind of dealing with that. But they said they haven't ruled out him, coming back as a fire throwing guy out of the bullpen for a couple innings. But they are going to try and push him to be at least a five guy, a 5 innings type of guy there. But I don't think he's going to be pushed out to what we would come to see from a Walker Buehler in the postseason for 6 or 7 innings in there. I think it's probably going to be either a 5 inning role or in a potential back end of the bullpen type deal
gotcha.
with that. But we're going to stay with the Dodgers, specifically, sort of. But the news broke just as we were finishing recording last week that legendary broadcaster of the Dodgers, baseball, and even other sports, football, golf, legendary broadcaster Vin Scully passed away at the age of 94.
Yeah, such a bummer, and I'll probably defer to you more on Vin Scully with, having because you've listening to him call Dodgers games for so many years, but he's just a guy who uh, he knew the game of baseball, and he was always so good at describing everything and just keeping everything in perspective when it came to the game. He wasn't overly excitable, but you knew when there was like a really big moment going on that you could tell by hearing him. And sometimes that's like the best type of announcer is a guy that like this is an important moment, but they let you kind of take in the moment more so than just like screaming through it. Some announcers these days, like Gus Johnson type guys, he's not baseball, but or Matt Vasgersian for baseball, just go crazy and scream and scream and scream into the microphone. And I think the Vin Scully style of describing the game, and you can tell when there's this big intense moment going on, but it's like at the same time, he's letting you kind of see what's going on, and he just did a great job of, you know, kind of letting the game come to the people. So I think that was really cool for him. And obviously just a guy who the other thing that stands out with him other than obvious of him being such a great guy and a great storyteller and stuff, he was around for so many of the biggest moments in the sport. I mean, the Kirk Gibson home run, the Hank Aaron hitting his record breaking home run to break Babe Ruth's record. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on and on. I mean, he's just been around for so many big moments, and it's sad to see him pass away. He lived a great life, and he'll be forever remembered. So, um, I'm very, very disappointed to hear that he passed away. I didn't know that he had really been dealing with any kind of, obviously he was up there in age, but I didn't know he had been dealing with any kind of issues. So it was kind of surprising to me to hear that he passed away, and um, just I hated to see it, but um, glad that he lived a great life and he'll be remembered forever by baseball fans.
Yeah, so I'm gonna rant here a little bit, so I'm sorry for this one, but Vin Scully, the broadcaster, just had the perfect cadence, the perfect tempo, the perfect timing on every single moment. His ability, like you mentioned, to give you the energy and give you the excitement of the moment, but then to also pause and let you, even through the TV or on the radio, because he did both of them very well, to let you feel the atmosphere that was there. Like, you knew, even when he would make a great call for the home run with Kirk Gibson, like, he says it, And then you just have that perfect silence there where you just have the crowd and you can hear the emotion in the stadium. You can feel basically the whole atmosphere of what that moment meant to everybody in the stadium and then what it meant to people at home. And he did a perfect job of weaving those moments throughout the game himself. And one of the things about him being the broadcaster is you don't see it anymore. He was a solo broadcaster. He went into these 9 inning games of baseball and did it by himself. And he was a legendary storyteller throughout the game. He knew that baseball is a game that gives you moments to where there's going to be downtimes where you can weave a story into it, and he would know just how to use the story and then know when something in the game was going to happen, and then be able to stop his story right away, call the play, and then just smoothly bring his story right back in. And it wasn't even just in baseball. I mean, he did some golf game, or some golf as well. A lot of people don't realize he was the one that called the catch between Dwight Clark and Joe Montana for the 49ers game. That 49ers, which was the catch, I think is what it's known as, actually, the
Yeah,
catch.
the NFC Championship.
Yeah, he was on the call for that as well, and he was able just to do every single sport he wanted to, every single moment in any sport. He made it feel special. Um, in and I know I have more of the thing because I was able to watch him, but even thinking that, like, I'm 26, he retired in 2016. My time was very, very short of being able to actually know and listen to Vin Scully, because I really didn't get into baseball until I was almost a teenager. And being able to just have those few years where he was able to call everything and really made it feel special to me. But for what he meant to the city of Los Angeles and the sports world in general, it's you felt it this week, everywhere. I mean, everyone has had some story of what Vince Scully has been able to do for them, or what he was as a kid listening, or what he's done for them as a kid listening. With people putting radios under their pillows to go to sleep, listening to him call the games, or him calling their favorite moment, or players saying how special it was just to have him, call one of their games, or say hit their name even. Um, to broadcast with one team, with the Dodgers, for 67 seasons in a row is very, very unheard of. It is, he was. I was watching one of the tributes to him, and the thing is, like, that a lot of people, at least I didn't realize for a long time. I knew it the past couple years, but he kind of ushered baseball to the West Coast. He came with the Dodgers and the Giants when they moved from New York together to the West Coast, and was the voice of them at the time. So he basically introduced West Coast and saw West Coast baseball come from nothing into what we have nowadays. Um, and it's just, to be able to have that, and have that reputation that he had and built there, it's beyond what anyone can say through words, and his impact will be felt long, long past what I'm able to say, or what anybody's able to say, on the game. But before I stop my rant here, there's one little nugget that I saw after he had passed, which I thought was absolutely amazing. Before Vin Scully started calling baseball games, and I don't know the exact number, so don't hold me to it, but before he started calling baseball games, something like 10,734 Major League players had made their debut. From the time Vin Scully started broadcasting his first game to the day he retired, it was something like 10,727. It was something like within 10 or 15 players had made their debut from the time before he ever started broadcasting, between the time he started to when he retired. So he basically, at one time until he retired, basically saw half of the Major League Baseball players ever to play the game play or debut, which was, it's really amazing when you start to really think about it.
Yeah, that really is impressive. I mean, and like I said, if you've watched baseball for the last, you know, if you're not just a brand new baseball fan, you know who Vin Scully is, and every single person appreciates him. And I think it's just great that we were able to have him as long as we did. So
Absolutely. Well, not to end on such a sad point there. So let's jump over to the players of the week and wrap this show up. So for this past week, who do you have for your hitter?
So my hitter I picked was Nolan Arenado. He has put up a 476 average in his last 6 games with 3 home runs, a 560 on base, a 1,000 slugging percentage. The guy who obviously plays great defense at third base. He's been really, really good, and it kind of just as a nobody's really talking about him that much right now. And I think that's not fair because Nolan Arenado has actually put up the most wins above replacement in the National League by almost a half a WAR over Paul Goldschmidt, who obviously has been great this year too, teammates, but no, none of them are close to Aaron Judge and what he's done in the American League. But Nolan Arenado has put up 5.8 wins above replacement this year, and nobody's really talking about him in like the MVP conversation. Everyone's kind of talking about Paul Goldschmidt, or I guess they're still talking about Manny Machado for some reason, or you know, uh, they're talking about Austin Riley a little bit, Freddie Freeman. They're not talking about Nolan Arenado right now, and I think they should be because he's been insanely good this year. Like I say, he's been putting up, a 158 WRC plus in the season with playing Gold Glove defense at third base. I mean, what else could you ask for from a player? I mean, I know Paul Goldschmidt's been better as a hitter, but I mean, he's not even close to what Nolan Arenado's done with the glove. And it's just interesting to me that nobody's really talking about him, but figured I'd shine a little bit of light on him because he has been probably the best hitter this week in the league. So good for Nolan Arenado and all the people, including myself, who were a little bit skeptical. I wasn't as skeptical as some, but I was a little bit skeptical of his hitting translating out of Coors, and I was dead wrong about that. So
Yeah, Arenado has been, like you mentioned, one of the best players in baseball this year. I think the just the little reason that you don't hear about him quite as much in the MVP is he went through about a month spell where he had a little bit of a lull. Like I'm saying, lull as he still was batting like 270 or 260 or something and hitting for decent power. But it made his numbers. I mean, he started off the season as one of the hottest players. I mean, we were talking about him and Manny Machado as the hottest hitter on the planet for the first, like month and a half of the season. And then Paul Goldschmidt took that over. But Arenado had really, for that month span or 3 to 4 week span right there, had kind of went into a little bit of a lull. And I think that's kind of when you saw people start kind of taking him out of the race. And then the past, I would say, even a couple weeks, he's really kind of surged back into that with the great week that you were mentioning here, and the defense that he still plays at an incredibly high level. And I do think that people are starting now to see that his offense, wasn't just a Coors Field thing. Like I understand there might be a little bit of drop off, but I think a lot of people were expecting a good amount of drop off from him. And I just never thought that was actually the case. I mean, I just felt like he was such a good hitter in general, that he would be able to survive wherever he was really playing. And his home road splits weren't all that much different. So it's been a great week for Arenado as well. With a 16% walk rate, 16% strikeout rate. I always kind of find it kind of funny when they have this exact same on both of those stats. But good week for Arenado and vaulting himself back into that, MVP candidacy for sure. But for my hitter this week, I went with a first baseman DH guy we didn't really see into the majors till this year, and that's the Philadelphia Phillies, Derek Hall. Guys been pretty good this year for the Phillies. They've sort of needed it with Harper being out. And then Castellanos and Schwarber. I mean, Schwarber fell into a rut lately. Castellanos struggled most of the season. But Derek Hall this week, a 471 average, a 526 on base, a 1.118 slugging percentage for a 343 WRC plus. He is .6 WAR this week, but that's with a negative .4 defensive value. So if he was able to play, even remotely, better defense, that WAR would probably be second this week as far as hitters wise. But 3 homers, 4 runs, 4 RBIs. Just a kind of feel good story for a guy who had been kind of a career minor leaguer, getting a shot this year and has been pretty good and had a pretty good week.
Yeah, for sure. And Derek Hall has been a big time piece for the Phillies. I don't think he's going to keep up what he's done so far, but he's really helped them through the Harper injury, and we'll see. Maybe he's a piece that is somewhat useful going forward. He definitely is a big guy, has a lot of power, so maybe he can take advantage of that a little bit. And obviously being 27 years old and in your first season in the majors doesn't really have too much of a track record, but be interesting to see if he's able to stay in some kind of a role with the Phillies big league team. But moving on to pitchers here, my pitcher of the week, I went with um, Kevin Gossman. Kevin Gossman has had a really strange season this year. He's had this week pitched 2 starts, 14 innings, did not give up a run. He struck out a lot of guys. I think he struck out 15, and he walked maybe like one. So pretty good, maybe two. Pretty good outings from Kevin Gossman over the last week. Um, he's had the weirdest season. He's got a 198 FIP. He's been worth 4.4 wins above replacement, but he has a 367 batting average on balls in play allowed, which is just unbelievably high. Like that is an astronomical number, and it's no way sustainable either. So I think that he's a guy who, in this down the stretch, that number just can't stay that high, and it's gonna come down. And as it comes down, if he continues to pitch the same way he's pitched so far this year, he's gonna have a huge last couple months. So Kevin Gossman, good for him, and I'm glad that he's finally starting to get some of the results, even though he's got a sub 3 ERA on the season. He's starting to get some of the results that he's really deserved this year because he's actually been better than his ERA. So I mean, than his ERA. So
Yeah, Kevin Gossman was a guy who I wasn't quite as high on as other people coming into the year. His second half last year was horrendous. It was really really bad. He had a great first half last year, but that second half, it kind of just did not look good at all. And then coming over to the Blue Jays, I was hoping that they would be able to find something with him that would, help them click, like kind of what they did with Robbie Ray after he had struggled. And he's been pretty solid overall for them. You mentioned leading the league for pitching WAR this year, and that batting average on balls in play is incredibly high. It, like you mentioned, not sustainable at all. That should come down. So it is kind of a weird season. I mean, he's went through a stretch where he was really good, and I think he struggled for 3 or 4 starts, and then now he's kind of got back to being on the better side and being good again. I just always wonder if that second half kind of last year is going to creep back anywhere, and for Kevin Gossman especially. But for my pitcher this week, I went with a pitcher who made his season debut this past week. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him or not, but a guy by the name of Jacob deGrom made his season debut now for the Mets. Seems to be a pretty good pitcher. In 2 starts over this week, went 10 2/3 innings with 18 strikeouts, 1 walk, 3 earned runs. But as Matt can attest to, one of those games were against the Braves, and where he had 5 2/3 innings with 2 earned runs, 1 homer, 1 walk, but 12 strikeouts.
yeah, and you mentioned that game. He was perfect through those first 5 2/3, and then he walked. I think he walked Ronald. No, I think it was Ronald Acuna. He walked. No, it was Dansby Swanson hit a home run. He walked Arcia. So Ronald Acuna was out on Sunday. He walked Arcia, and then he gave up a home run to Dansby Swanson that gave up 2 runs. So you look at his final line, you're like 5 2/3 innings, 2 runs. Like that's good, but it's not DeGrom good. But it was not didn't tell the whole story. And remember too, DeGrom was on a pitch count in his 2 games that he's pitched so far. So he was limited to I think about 75 ish in his second start. So he wasn't even really fully able to go. He probably would have got pulled after that 6th inning anyways on Sunday, and I think he got pulled after 5 in his first start. So just pretty insane from him so far.
Yeah, DeGrom has been incredible. He looked so good. I mean, what was he throwing? 90 2 or 93-mile-an-hour sliders.
Oh no, I
Like,
think it was 94, 95.
oh, that's just so insane, dude. Like, I couldn't even imagine what that, as a hitter, what that would even look like. Like, that's incredibly difficult. That almost basically impossible to hit.
Yeah, and it's the fact too that a lot of those 94, 95. Some people call them sliders, but they're really more of like they really move like cutters, and they don't move a ton. It's more like a that hard slider slash cutter. But the Grum's like it breaks. I mean, it breaks a lot. So it's kind of like you're watching somebody throw a traditional slider, except it's except it's 94. So it's pretty insane.
That or like a 103 cutter like Camilo Duvall threw yesterday
Yeah, like
to end the game.
it's
Just
crazy.
stupid what these guys can do. But anyways, anything else you wanna wrap up with the show?
Not too much. Honestly, from looking at the standings right now, we got 2 months left, but it's kind of we're kind of getting to a point to where there's not really a whole lot of close races going on. Uh, you got both the Centrals, but the NL West is for sure decided. The American League East is probably decided. The American League West is decided. The NL East after this past weekend is getting close to decided. I don't think 7 games is completely insurmountable, but it's pretty close to it. And then really, so we got the AL Central with a three teams within 3 games, and then the NL Central where the Cardinals and Brewers are going to duke it out for that title. And it's kind of time to start paying attention to this a little bit closer. We only got about 6 or 7 weeks left in the season. Everyone's played over 100 games now. We got about 50 games left, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to these races, and then the wild cards are going to be pretty close too. In fact, I believe the Orioles are still only like 1 game out or something of the wild card. So pretty crazy that they're still kind of in it. Um, it's kind of hard to believe, honestly. So we'll see. Also, the Mariners, can they make their first playoff push since back in 2001? So definitely going to be an interesting. Definitely going to be an interesting finish to the season, and it's going to be exciting to watch. It's going to be some good baseball over the next couple months.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. And then speaking of that Orioles team, just the one saying, they're fun.
Oh
They
yeah,
are fun. That Hank, our buddy who's an Orioles fan, says, don't call them good, just call them fun. So
oh
that's
yeah.
what we're going to do. We're going to end off with the Orioles being a fun team so far this year, and hopefully that fun team makes a push at a wild card spot, because that would be pretty interesting to see. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.